Okay, so we're live.
Welcome back, everyone. It's technically managing number
Nine.
nine. You literally told me right before this.
Yes. I'm worried about your memory now.
No, it's like whenever I get like ready for this podcast, my brain's in like 1,000 places. I'm like trying to predict what we're going to talk about and make sure I don't talk like an idiot. But
You know what? Like that's another skill that PMs have to have. The
mhm.
switching from one topic to another, one meeting talking about, I don't know, the website that is like live right now, and then you have to like talk to development about some other feature that you want to change. So that's something that we have to train on that I definitely struggle with for sure.
Yeah, wait.
Switching themes.
I have a question on that. First, we should probably introduce ourselves. I'm
Yes.
Zach Telke.
And I'm Ramu Murakami.
And if you're new to the podcast, this is technically managing. We're both product managers at Oracle. And basically every other week we just talk about pretty much it's a pretty like wide ranging podcast. We'll go from just
Yeah.
like personal life, surviving your 20s, to also just like what we're doing in our jobs, career advice, things that we're like thinking about, working on, ways that we're like looking to improve. So we're kind of like blending both aspects of that.
Definitely.
So no, that the question that like that just brought up is like this is something that I think is probably one of the harder things about PM that I've been having to like deal with and
Adapting.
experiment with is like because our job kind of means we do everything, like being the product
Mhm.
manager, and we touch on so much stuff. Like there is more information that we're dealing with like in the day than we can retain. And that's like something where I think on one hand, I'm curious how your brain handles it. So for
Mhm.
me, I have a pretty selective memory where, especially when I'm in like work mode or focused on something, I'm very bad. I've always been this way about like stuff that's not in my like relevancy
Mhm.
scope at the moment goes like in 1 year, out the other one. So like on one hand, you kind of have to do that because if you don't, you would just constantly be overwhelmed by the information and you get nothing done. Because like we have to like manage like all these requests and talking to so many different people, like both internally and externally. With also like I still got like long form work where I have to sit down and just zone
Mhm.
in for 4 hours and I can't break concentration. Like I feel like it's something that I've personally gotten better about. And like the more I'm self-aware, I kind of catch myself. I'm like, oh, I need to pay more attention to like certain things. But I don't know. It's like a hard
Yeah.
one because like I don't think there'll ever be a perfect solution. I think that just kind of comes with the job. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I think for me, concentrating for like long periods of time, if it's not something that I'm like very like, I don't know, excited about, it's really
Mhm.
hard. Um, and I try my best to keep everything organized. I told you before I use Jira. So like I write myself my little Jira ticket saying, hey, work on this, work on that, you know? And but something that really bothers me is maybe when I'm working on something and someone pings me and kind of tells me, this is due right now. Like, can you please help me with this? And all my focus goes out the window. And I also feel like I have times where I'm more concentrated than others. So it really depends on what, state of mind I'm in.
Yeah.
But of course, we do have deadlines. We have things that we have to work on like right now, So it is a skill that you have to develop. And I also feel like now it's harder because we're always on our phones, we're always looking at different content at the same time. Like my memory is just terrible too, in that sense. Like I don't retain as many things. So I have to write everything down nowadays.
Yeah. I do that a lot. Like everything goes in my OneNote. And that's even something that
Oh, it's so disorganized. My OneNote is terrible.
I originally tried to keep it super organized, but
Mhm.
the kind of dilemma I'm running up against that is kind of like too much information. So
Mhm.
if I were to say try to get it as organized as I wanted to, then
Mhm.
I would just be spending all day organizing my OneNote. It's like I
Yes.
got to get stuff done. So like there is like this balance between being organized enough where you can find things, but also like keeping enough chaos that you're not spending too much time on it. And honestly, like I think part of like, at least for me, it's like I draw my creativity from chaos, where it's like if I'm too
Mhm.
regimented and orderly, my creativity shuts down because my brain gets bored. I'm like, I can predict what's going to happen next by having like a bit of like a let's blend this stuff together. And just even with my sticky notes, I'll kind
Yeah.
of go through phases where I'll have like a bunch of sticky notes all over my desk, and it gets to the point where it's like too chaotic. I need to just throw it all in
Mhm.
one note. But I have had ideas just by like looking at a sticky note for one thing and like seeing a paper note on like something else, and like just a weird connection gets made in my brain. So I don't know. That whole
Yeah.
thing's like interesting, kind of how you deal with information when you have too much of it.
Yeah. I do think that everyone struggles with this because I feel like I've had this conversation with almost everyone that's a VM, and they're
Mhm.
like, oh, I don't know how to stay organized, or I don't know how to remember this because you might be in a meeting, right? And you're recording the meeting or you're talking to someone without recording the meeting, and something comes up, and I tend to write down everything like really quick. And then sometimes I don't even know what I wrote, you know?
No, literally, you get like caught in like the act of taking notes. I used to do that in school the whole time, where one of the things that I think has helped me get better about that kind of behavior is now when I work on a project or something. This is actually one of the things I wrote down to talk about on the podcast. It's
Mhm.
like this whole back in school, we had to basically, like the way things were done is you had to study. So it was like all this time where you quote unquote had to like research the thing, but then
Mhm.
you didn't like execute on it until weeks later, whether it was like the test or quiz. So you never really knew what was important, and you would kind of
Yeah,
forget stuff by the time you got around to it. Like for being tested on it. Cause like there's just like it's just a bunch of information. Like you're the student, you don't know what to teach. I mean, you start to get a feel for what teachers care about, which is how you prepare for
exactly.
tests. But like that's one of the reasons why instead of just I guess trying to learn everything and then going like yourself, like what's most important, like the way that kids like think through if they're being like sharp about it, preparing for tests, like what has Professor so and so cared about in the past? What format does he prefer? Like long
Yep.
term, like long form writing or like multiple choice and all that stuff. But
I
yeah,
think
like
me, my professor,
what'd you
people
say? Oh, the
people
rate my
just
professor.
rate my professor to see how they can pass the class. But I
Yeah.
for sure feel like definitely in school, I at the beginning I would try to understand what the professor wanted more or less. And then at the end I felt like that was when everything clicked for me. So I would always do better at the end of like the semester, and that is because of patterns, right? Like then you find out and realize they're more interested in this and that, or their test format and stuff like that. So yeah, it is all about patterns.
No, literally back. Did you ever have those professors in school where they would just the entire grade was just your midterm and your final?
Oh,
And
yes.
it was such a stressful thing because you're like, there is nothing to kind of like break this up, just like
Mhm.
diversify like what goes into calculating our grades. Like you don't even have like any sample data like in your brain on like
Terrible.
what this guy looks for. It was those were like the most stressful. But yeah, kind of like what brought me on this point is that was like also one of the things where I had to learn switching from school to like in a job now is like when you go about doing something that you haven't done before, like being a PM, how do you do it? Because for me, like for example, right now I'm building like a workshop with SQL CL and Apex. Basically, if for people who are familiar with like what I work on a database tools team, I've talked about a little bit, and like even for people who aren't, one of the products I'm focusing on is SQL CL, which is our command line for basically doing your database coding. And in our tool, we have this tool called, or this feature called Liquibase. And like what that does is like lets you automate deploying your database objects. So like let's say you have a database and you have tables, which is where your like actual data is stored. You might have like an employees table and a department table. And once you make your tables and other database objects once, and say if you have like a team of developers or something and you like want to deploy it to their machines, like so they also have the databases set up that way, like Liquibase lets you do that. So all you have to do is essentially like run two commands, and all that manual database work you had to do the first time, it's like easily just automatically added to your other users or databases. So that's kind of what SQL CL and Liquibase do. The workshop I'm working on right now is we can also do it with Apex apps. And Apex is our tool for, it's like our low code. So you don't really have to dive deep into programming languages. I believe you could put like custom code and JavaScript in if you want. But like basically you can build applications without having to have an advanced coding knowledge. And we can also use SQL CL Liquibase to deploy applications to new databases too, because the Apex apps live inside your Oracle database. So that's the little quick lesson on that, on what I'm working on. But like the thing with, well, is like just to get back to the point I was starting with
Wait, quick
that.
question. So is
Uh-huh.
it going to be available on Live Labs after some time, or so
Yeah.
people can try it and see how it works?
I'm building it for Cloud World, but it is going to be a live lab, so people will be able to try and see how it works. And it's not live yet,
Mm-hmm.
uh, but it like should be super shortly. And I'll probably, the next podcast is probably when I can do like a deep dive
Mm-hmm.
talking about it.
That'd be really cool.
My no, my big SQL CL liquid based workshop that I've been working on, like the 101 like basics, how to do everything, that's about to get released. So the one I'm working on with Apex right now, that's going to be kind of like a follow up. Hey, after you kind of cover your basics fundamentals with the work, like the big workshop I built, that one's about like an hour and a half long, like an hour to an hour and a half.
Mm-hmm.
This is like a short 30-minute one. I'll be like, hey, if you also work with Apex or have any interest in it, you can also use this to deploy your applications to other databases super quickly. But the kind of like what got me into this whole tangent about like what I'm working
Yeah.
on is I know I have to put in the product information and like
No, I think
pitch what
it's
I'm
super
working on while I'm
important.
there. Yeah. Because it is
Yeah.
cool stuff. And like even if we have to like pause the stories, like I do like getting that in there just because you don't know who might be interested. And it's like we do have this
Mm.
platform and we are technically a product management podcast,
Also,
but
SQL CL works with Graph,
mhm,
and
which
we
is
are
Ramu's area.
right, and we're planning on maybe doing some content on that. So actually, we could even try to do a live lab after some time using SQL CL, but we'll discuss that, you know.
Yeah. So Ramu and I have also been working on ways we can bring content that connects to different database tools area, like between our two teams. So I'm
Mm.
excited for that. But basically, I'm doing this secondary 30-minute workshop, and I don't really have experience using Apex. Um, and even like with deploying Apex apps with SQL CL Liquibase, I've done it a couple times, but I wouldn't say I've done it like a crazy amount. The
Mm.
way that I work and learn most efficient now versus like in school, it used to be study, then execute, is like learning as I go and I try to build this. And it has helped me be, I would say, like get the stuff to stick because when you're learning as you go, you see the importance of certain things and kind of like what's, I guess, interesting information, but might not be essential details. So because you have like a goal you're aiming towards, it does
Mhm.
make things a lot easier to stick. And I've like found it more enjoyable than just kind of like,
100%.
yeah, than just like blindly guessing and getting anxious about like, what am I going to be quizzed on? It doesn't even like matter how well you know the topic. Like you could know a lot about the subject area of whatever you're learning in school, but if that like the area that you personally focused on wasn't what the teacher was focusing on, like you'll still be screwed when a test comes around. So like it
Yep.
is kind of interesting seeing like the learning styles of I guess you'd call it like practice for the real world, and now how we actually have to do it. Because like, would you say that's how you do your learning of like new things? You kind of just take it as you go.
Yeah, like for example, like I'm trying to focus on creating more technical videos for YouTube because the way I work best is, let's say that I'm running into an issue and I don't know how to do something. I love to go to YouTube and Google, I'm having this issue with my window. Like, let's say, for example, I don't know, with Word, right? I want to, I don't know, highlight a word or whatever. And let's say I didn't know how to do that. The thing that I would do is go into YouTube and look up how can I highlight a word in Microsoft Word, and find a video. I will for sure look for the shortest video that will get me to my answer, and follow those steps, right? So that's kind of how I like learning if I get stuck, because I normally try to do it by myself intuitively until I get stuck, and then I try to look for, content on that. And I do think that that is something that we have to focus on nowadays. Like a lot of people learn differently, right? Like some people like to read blogs, other people have to like to watch videos and short videos, not crazy amount of videos. And some people don't even like voiceovers. They just want to get to the question or the steps without anyone explaining anything to them, but for sure I feel like I've learned the most when I'm just given a task of, hey, we would like to have a video about this, or we would like to present this in, I don't know, Ask Tom. That is one of the sessions that we have where people can join and learn a little bit about our technology, right? So definitely that's the best way I learn. And at the same time, sometimes I do get frustrated because I might spend like 3 hours figuring out one little thing, but then it's so like rewarding to actually, fix or go past whatever was stopping you,
Mhm.
So it's kind of like a love-hate relationship. And I guess like with experience, I won't be spending 3 hours after some time, right? But there's been times where I have to like delete my whole environment and start 100% from zero because I
Oh
don't know what
yeah.
the heck I messed up, So I think that is a process, but at the same time, it is very rewarding. And I don't know if people know, but with at least for Oracle, like the cloud, you're able to get a free account and break whatever you want inside of that account, and try different things like Apex, build your own application on Apex, or try SQL CL. Not try SQL CL, sorry. SQL
No, no, they can try SQL
Oh,
CL. That's
try
my
SQL
product.
CL. Exactly. Yeah. So you can try SQL CL. There's a lot of things that you can try with a free account. I know that they give you 30 days. So you can try anything you want, basically. But after that, you have an always free account where you can do, at least there are some limitations, but you can still build a couple of cool things in it. And again, going back also to live labs, you can also go into live labs. They'll provide you with an environment and you can break whatever you want, without getting in trouble. So I think practicing is definitely the best way of doing things.
Mhm. And the workshop, the both workshops you'll be able to use without having to like use paid resources on OCI
Mhm.
that I'm building.
Awesome.
The first one that I'm all like that I pretty much am done with. I'm just waiting for the approvals to go through.
Mhm.
That one works with always free resources. So even after like the 30-day trial of like credits, you can still have an autonomous database running and you can do like all the stuff in the workshop with Liquibase and SQL CL just using that always free autonomous database like right in OCI. So that is like nice that if you have any interest in trying out what I'm working on, it will be completely free and that'll be great because like that 101 workshop, I'm like super proud and excited about because it literally gives you everything you need to know to like not just kind of understand using Liquibase, but even like all the surrounding concepts and kind of this is like something that like going back to the whole like learning as you go. I think
Mhm.
that's kind of the superpower that we have now is when you move up in your career, you have like all this lived experience, but you kind of forget the assumptions that people start with when they don't know about something. Like,
Mm-hmm. A hundred
because,
percent.
yeah. And for me, like, one of the things is when I was building this workshop, like, not only did I want the steps to be there of like, okay, how do you like replicate your database objects onto other databases? How do you roll back changes easily if something like didn't deploy the way you want it to? Like, what's even going on in the files that you're working with? Like, I didn't want this to just be like one of those workshops where you click through and you're like, okay, I did the thing, but I don't really understand what I just did. So
Mm-hmm.
I put like so much background info to this. If you look at the introduction section of this workshop, like, you don't have to read through all of it, but if you're curious, like, I give a full rundown of how this helps with CI/CD. And what CI/CD is, it stands for continuous integration, continuous delivery. And basically, if you want to make like an automation pipeline for your software development, SQL Liquidbase is super helpful for that, because you can create, like, with the Liquidbase feature and a couple other tools, this like automated pipeline where your developers, they'll automatically have their databases created and cloned from like a template. It can do all the setup scripts. Then SQL Liquidbase can create all the database objects in there. And then like I even like talk about how you can like do unit testing after. So I'm very happy with how, because this was like something that I'm like, how does this fit in the bigger picture? What's the value here? And these were questions I was asking as
Mm-hmm.
I went along. I was able to put that information in there from someone who's like, I don't know, so how would I do it? And like even just areas where it talks about topics like, say, XML files, which is the file format for the change logs, which is like basically the Liquidbase files where the database objects are stored in, like in which, when you're like, those files are what you're deploying. Like, even with that, I couldn't really find much information out there that was good and not like super complicated on
Mm-hmm.
how XML files work. Because if you like don't know what all the, I guess, elements inside are, it's just this giant text file that has like all of these words, and you're like, what does this all mean? So like I put like how all this works, so you can like literally go from zero to understanding everything of it. And like, I don't know, that's like something that's I thought was really cool, and it did kind of just
Yeah,
remind me about like, this is where I can provide value, is that like forward looking
exactly.
perspective.
Yeah, no, I 100%. And I think we mentioned it in our couple first episodes. The fact that we have that perspective of not coming from a technical background give us an advantage to see where people would be confused, or they would want to know more information, right? So that they can move forward and become more technical on that, feature or topic that they're trying to learn more on. Because with experience, a lot of people might just think like, oh, but they know that, or oh, but that step is just, kind of like intuitive, but it's not intuitive always,
And it is funny because that whole like mindset is something that you can't like, to remind yourself like how it feels. Like, I feel like there's everyone has something where
Mhm.
they're super deep in and
Yep.
interested in, and then it's like you bring it up to someone else and you can just like seeing that look in their face where they're just like, you are like starting three chapters. I need you to like
Yep.
rewind three
Yep.
chapters. Like, for me with my girlfriend Montana, like, I'm super into philosophy. So if I'm like just thinking about something or whatever, I'll just like start using like pretty just complicated language sometimes that is like makes complete sense to me, because that's like the default assumption my brain's operating in.
Right.
But she's like, I need you to like step this back a couple.
Simplify this a little more.
Yeah. And it's not, yeah, it's like you can be as like clear. And I think that's something that is kind of interesting with it, is like you can be as clear as possible,
Hmm.
but the way you communicate to people who don't have your level of, I guess, what you call like knowledge or expertise in
Hmm.
whatever you're trying to communicate, it's like you have to give them the building blocks, because,
Yep.
and you have to like, I don't like the word bring it down a level because it makes it sound like,
Like you're like dumb kind of
yeah,
thing. Yeah.
yeah, like I don't like that. It's almost,
Mhm.
I'm trying to think of like a better word, but I guess like everyone starts as a beginner,
Mhm.
and if you're just talking at the level that like you're at, that doesn't do anyone any good because then you're only talking to people who already know what you know. And if they already know what you know, then there's nothing for you to teach them. Like you have
Right.
to like give those Lego blocks when you go.
Yeah. Also, if you're on the other side of someone explaining things to you, I feel like I run into this a lot, and is that I don't know. For example, for spatial technology, I'll always go to David from my team. And for graph, I'll always go to Melly, my manager, right? And I always feel so bad because I will ask them like very, very basic questions as of like, but exactly what does this mean and how does it work? Because I'm a
Mhm.
visual person. I'm not a person that you can tell them like, I don't know. Like I like the physical explanation more so that I can paint it in my brain more than the logical explanation of something. And I know that sometimes you can't give the physical explanation of something in technology, but I will go in depth to understand every word sometimes. And I feel bad kind of like going back and forth into like getting deeper and deeper into a concept. But it's because like I genuinely want to understand, right? Like I'm a PM for this topic. Like I want to be able to get into their level. And
Yeah.
of course they come from a very, very technical background compared to me, right? So sometimes I do feel very bad asking questions, but and honestly, like if you're a senior um watching our podcast, like I feel like it is so important to give your team a space to actually feel comfortable asking questions, because the other day I was literally digging so deep into this concept for our new release for 23C. And David, after some time, he messages me and he's like, and you know what? If you don't understand something that I've messaged you or we discussed and you just don't understand it yet, please let me know so that I can clarify. And I appreciated that so much, because sometimes you just feel so bad asking them so many questions and just feeling like you're kind of like not getting it, you're a little slower or whatever. So it's nice to have that safe environment where you can ask questions without feeling like you're bothering someone, you know?
Yeah. Everyone, I wouldn't say everyone, almost almost everyone I've interacted with at Oracle, and I would say like that's one of the things that
Well,
especially
who did you think about when you said almost everyone?
honestly I didn't have anyone in mind, but I'm just like
Okay,
I'm sure there are people
just
out
in
there who are
case.
like I had a bad experience. Like yeah,
Yeah.
that was just me not wanting to like say an absolute. That's funny. But no, like that's one of the things I do value so much about the team that we're in. And
Mhm.
it is it is kind of like interesting because I have thought about how tech is like pretty ruthless with who they let in to like just jobs and industries and like not industries because one industry, but like just the company and just different areas and stuff.
Mhm.
And the kind of more I'm starting to like get a picture for how this works, I'm like, it does make sense why with the talent in tech there is like such scrutiny around like who's in the ecosystem because like we are reliant on each other and everyone has been like super great about just like hey if you have any questions like reach out. People don't give me like a hard time if I like follow up or if I just like come to them out of nowhere. I'm like here's something super obscure and
Mhm.
all that because it is kind of this it's this interesting ecosystem where we are all reliant on each other because you have a big company like Oracle and just even all the big tech companies, we have so many different super deep products that it's impossible for any one person
To
to
know
know
everything.
everything. So it's
Mhm.
like you need to rely on each other. Like this isn't just even like about being like nice, although that aspect is like a beneficial one and it's everyone's like happier when everyone comes out with like a positive attitude, but it's also
Exactly.
it's like necessary too. And that's like something Jeff has been very good about being my manager is like he always answers my questions, even if I just like come out of like left field with them. And even when I'm like not asking questions, I feel like he's good about. I like that he also throws in his like 2 cents, like even unprompted by me, because
Mm-hmm.
I think like a good manager also tries to predict the areas that you don't even know you don't know, because those are like the most important ones. Is if you know
Exactly.
you don't know something, like you're already working to get to know it, but there
Mm-hmm.
might be like some super important stuff that like you don't even know to ask a question because like you don't even know that there's something you have to worry about over in that sphere.
Yeah, no, I agree. Everyone has been so collaborative too. Like, I think they all make you comfortable to like speak up. At least in my team, like I know at the beginning because like we were very quiet, like the people that just joined.
Mhm.
Sometimes they would be like, "Hey, what do you guys think?" And like actually call your name and stuff. Like I feel like that has been so like inclusive, and those little things do help with communication inside your team for sure. And also like talking about like, collaborating with other teams. So like if you're a PM and you're starting, from zero, definitely bring up ideas of collaborating with other teams because I think that's like the best way for your product to be seen by customers that might not be familiar with your product. Like for example, Zach works on SQL tools, right?
Mhm.
Like database tools in general.
Yeah, our team is database tools, so we
Mhm.
cover like everything kind of in that sphere, which
Exactly.
is a handful of products.
And that is huge, right? So if I know that he has a product or not even a product, but like a tool or a feature that collaborates with like the product that I am managing, it is a really good idea for you to go to that person and be like, hey, let's do something together. Let's do a webinar together. Let's do a presentation together. Let's do, I don't know, a vlog or a video together because that is such a great way to get your product out there for people that don't know about it. And at least, for example, with Oracle, we're such a big company that we have so many solutions to different types of problems, and not everyone is aware of them. And
Mhm.
that is something that is also really nice, right? Like people are willing to put in the time to collaborate with each other, even if you guys are not in the same team. At least that
Yeah.
that has been my experience in Oracle.
Yeah, that's been mine too, where it's like sometimes you do get caught up with like deadlines and stuff, and people have like
Mhm.
more times than other, or have more time sometimes than other. But like at the end of the day, it's like if they have the time, everyone's been willing to like help out. One of the things kind of like on that tangent that I've been thinking about it more, I would say, is
Mhm.
the highest like levels of the company, like your high senior level executives, like CEO, Safra, your like Larry, CTO types, at a big tech company like ours, I'm very curious how they make decisions because of the fact that there is so much that we do. You know what I'm saying? Where you have to have, like, we are still one company, like one corporation, and you do have to
Mhm.
have your like overall large scale strategies and vision for the company to move forward.
Right.
So, and I would assume a lot of it is just being able to trust and rely on your like officers within the company, which are like the representatives and experts for each area. But that's something that like is kind of interesting, I would say, because right now, with the level that we're at, is the way that like we learn is by doing. So that's how we
Mhm.
get familiar with what we're working on and like our specific product areas. But it's almost kind of like when you get to that level and you have to be responsible for more information than you can handle,
Mhm.
all of the information that you're getting is secondhand. And I'm
Right.
sure, yeah, like I'm sure like certain executives, like they still have their like favorite technology or their specialist areas where it's like, no, I'm going to still get my hands dirty with that. But they don't have time to get their hands dirty with everything. So
Right.
I
It's
don't know, like,
overwhelming.
yeah, I wonder how they do it. And I wonder kind of what their tricks and like methods for handling that is. Because it's kind of like even like the beginning of the episode, we're talking about how like you do have to have a bit of a selective memory, and part
Mhm.
of learning and improving in your job is kind of like that trial and error of like, okay, I should have been paying attention to that when I kind of just like let it be like an in one ear, out the other ear type thing. But you're not gonna like know that until you learn it from experience. So I don't know, it would be cool if the podcast got big enough one day where
Please.
we could get like a top. I'm not requesting Larry right now or anything, but like you know what I'm saying, like upper level executives. Like I'm very
Yeah.
curious how those types of people's brain tick,
Hmm.
because just when they've come to talk to us, like for like I still remember, I believe it was Mark Kira who was one
Hmm.
of our top sales
Sales.
leaders. Yeah,
Hmm.
when Ramu and I were solution engineers, he came and spoke to a bunch of like the new hires across. I know it was definitely solution engineering. I think there might have been some like sales entry level people too, but there was just something about his, even just over a Zoom call, something about his like presence and the way he like commanded attention, used words, and the energy he projected. I'm like, that kind of like caught me back. I'm like, this person hits different. Like, there's something to this. And I feel like you have your like salespeople are someone where you see it easier because it's a very external facing.
Hmm.
But I'm curious what how Mark Hira learned to like hit like that when he communicates. I'm curious how like the upper level strategy types are able to consolidate all the information, a lot of which they have to get secondhand to not just like make decisions, but make sure they're making like like decisions based on accurate information. Because it's hard
Right.
enough to make this like make the right decision even when you have complete information.
Oh my
That
God.
just gets so much trickier when it's like I can't even self-verify this.
I think they definitely focus on like the bigger picture more than that's why we're here, right? Like we're here
Mhm.
to focus on like the small little like, you know, picky stuff in our product, you know? Um, and I guess it's just also trust, right? Like you have to trust, like, for example, like your managers, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that is a great question. And I think it would be interesting to see how organized they are too, right? Because that requires a lot of organization.
I
Like,
can't wait till the day I'm far enough up where I get my own personal assistant. I feel like that'll help me a lot.
oh my God, I cannot imagine that, but it will happen, hopefully.
Yeah, I am always curious. I've mentioned this podcast all the time. Tim Ferriss's. He's very good about asking like CEOs and like corporate leader and just business entrepreneur types, those kind of, I don't like the word mundane questions, but those like very specific, like how do you organize your calendar? Like what do you do that's your own note work versus what do you outsource for someone to manage you? Because even though everyone's answer is different, you do start to kind of pick up on patterns
Yeah,
of like high performance behavior.
definitely. And I also feel like we would have to put it into tests, right? Like maybe like 1 week we try this type of organization, the other one we try this other type, because if not, like everyone works different. So
Mhm.
something might work for you, but not for me.
Well, yeah, talking about that experimenting, I think that was one of the questions that you were saying you wanted to talk about in
Mm,
relation to the newsletter that I do. So did you
yep.
want to like set that one up?
Yeah. So, I always read your newsletters every Wednesday,
Aw.
always, right? And I was surprised. So I think it was while you took some time off, right? So do you want to go over why you took some time off, maybe?
So for people who've been listening to the podcast for a
Oh,
while,
and what did you do too, right? Because we want to know what you did.
okay. Yeah. So for people who have been listening to the podcast for a while, about a month ago, Ramu and I came in hot on an episode where we had been like both grinding pretty hard. We were getting a little bit burned out, and we had a little bit of a dance party. We waved some sage around and got the bad energy out and talked about how we're gonna be better about
I'm
like
grateful, right? More grateful.
yeah. Well, I think we've been. we've been both, I would say, at least I'll only speak for myself. I've been good about the grateful thing,
Mm-hmm.
but we were talking a lot about how, like, okay, we need to be better about like not overdoing it, not burning ourselves out, just kind
Mm-hmm.
of putting boundaries up when we need to.
Yeah.
And after we did all that stuff, I burned myself out more like 2 weeks later, just because of all I was trying to juggle. So I just like wanted a reset week. So I took a week off and during the time just got away from work, like worked on some other side stuff outside of Oracle that I wanted to do, like was good about just going to the gym. And I also did spend an entire morning because my stack of notes on my desk was getting like way too crazy. I put that all into OneNote, cleaned it up. That relieves so much stress in and of itself. Is just having a clean desk. And I forgot how much anxiety that was giving me.
Yep.
So one of the things where using that time off I was doing um was I was just taking stock of like everything on my plate, everything I was trying to do, both in terms of my work life and also just personal stuff. And I'm like, okay, I'm trying to do too many things all in different directions all at once. This is why we're in this place right now. I'm like, there are certain things in terms of deadlines that I have to get done. So let's prioritize those, especially because I'm doing a couple cloud world things. So like that's a big prioritization
Mm-hmm.
right now. But then I'm like, but where are the areas where I can make adjustments and I can say shift energy away from? And I would say there are two types of kind of activities in our job, just to make what I'm about to describe simple. It's like your mentally intensive work and your you don't really have to be like completely locked in type work. I was trying to do too many mentally intensive things, which you just you hit a wall with it. Like you can't always be doing creative writing. You can't
You didn't have
always
a balance, basically.
yeah, I didn't have a balance. And one of the things I was doing that was mentally intensive was the newsletter, which I still have. It's the Wednesday weekly. If you want to sign up for that, it's on telky.tech. It used to be every week. I would do a newsletter about the things going on in database tools product management. I would keep it fun. So there are 3 quotes of the week, and I would just talk about like articles I was writing, technologies I was working on, workshops I was building, linking to it. And I would often share other people's stuff too. Like Ramu, you had an article I shared. Um, I shared Chris Hoyna on my team, who's another product manager, some of his cool stuff he's been working on. So I really love that newsletter.
Mm-hmm.
And it was something that I did want to continue, but I was also realizing that it was taking a lot of mental energy on my Tuesdays for a Wednesday release. And because my problem was too many mentally intensive tasks, I'm like, okay, I really like doing this newsletter and I want to make sure I continue to do a good job with it. So while I have to prioritize my actual work and like my deadlines and like my main PM activities, on the flip side, I don't want the quality of this newsletter to suffer because I want it to be like multiple times worth the value when people open of their time they take. Like it takes
Right.
to read it and all that, just because people's time's important. There's attention grabbing for everywhere. Like the competition of today's age is for your time. So I'm like, okay, what can I do with these parameters to fix my situation? And I'm like, what if I just make it a monthly newsletter where I only have to worry about it once a month? It'll be easier for me to have more content around it because it's no longer this weekly scramble. Um, and just like also with it, like it'll just give me more space to work with and I don't have to like worry about giving up on the quality for it. So the Wednesday weekly is now going to be called the monthly mail. If you want to sign up for it, still on Telky Tech, I have to change up the page for it so it still says Wednesday weekly, but it's essentially going to be the same thing that I'm doing now, what I'm working on, any cool Oracle resources and
I think
information about our
I really
technology.
I really also liked how short it was and how
Uh-huh.
right to the point it was. So
Yeah.
I think that's like key for sure, because it's like easier to digest, But no, I loved your weekly. I miss it sometimes, but it's okay.
Oh no, that like I think that'll be like a good thing for it because now I can make sure that I don't say burn people out on it too. Where I did like the weekly thing for the repetition, but like having it monthly now, I think that will be better because I can kind of still like keep it very value packed, like you're saying, like
Mhm.
succinct and concise. But now like there's like less of a scramble I have to worry about, and it does like free up more time for me. So that's been like nice getting that burned in off my shoulders.
So I want to highlight a couple of things, right?
Mhm.
Number one is that, like, when I read that, I was like, wow, I'm so proud of him because I feel like sometimes it's hard and it happens to me all the time. Like, let's say someone comes up to me and they tell me, um, we need to do this. And I'll give myself a deadline out loud, right? And I'll say something like, oh, I'll have this by the end of this week, right? Then it's really hard to go back in your, oh, I'll have this by the end of this week, right? And I feel like, I mean, like, I don't know what your thought process was, but for me, it would be like, wow, no, like, I really need to have this by the end of this week. And I'll feel bad, or like, I'll feel like I left myself down because I didn't have this by the end of this week, you know? So I feel like the having to go back and like correct, whatever your deadline was like a really big important step, at least like me personally, because like I feel identified to that.
Mhm.
And understanding kind of like that you have to prioritize yourself instead of all of this, work that you would like to do every week, but you can actually perform better doing it monthly, and continue to have that good quality, because at the end of the day, that's your newsletter, right? Like, you want it to be good, you want it to always deliver, right? But
Yeah.
at the same time, you go always back to, okay, like, I need to prioritize myself to do this the right way, right? And I think we forget about that sometimes. Like, sometimes I'll have so many deadlines that I'll be like, you know what? I just want to get it done. Like, at this point, I don't even care how it looks anymore.
Mhm.
And that shouldn't be your mentality, because that's your work. Like, that represents you still at work or outside of work. So I think those were, for me, were like the highlights of like what you did, and how I think it was like a really good choice and decision, because you're not giving up on anything. You're just saying, you know what, like, I'm gonna compromise to do it every month instead of every week.
Mhm. Yeah, and like you were saying with the whole, if I say I'm going to do something, like I take that really
Mhm.
seriously. So I
Yep.
hate when I can't do that. So I'm
Mhm.
like, that's like just the reason why I'm like, I have to find some way to change this because
Exactly.
I don't know. It's like I've always like prided myself with doing the best work that I can. It might not be the best thing in the world, but if I do it to the best of my ability in that moment, then
Right.
it's like I've stretched myself and learned from it.
Mhm.
And I would even say like with all the stuff I've been working on, like telky tech, product management, um, like all the different things within that sphere, and just even coming from a not tech background,
Mhm.
originally being in finance, like the way that I've been able to, I would say, get to the point where I am and like do the things I'm super grateful I'm able to do is because
Mhm.
I have had this mindset of like, don't be afraid to try something and like
Right.
fall on your face, look ignorant, like say or do some stupid stuff as long as you learn from it. Where like with all this stuff, like I came from a mindset of like, okay, I want to experiment with this. I think this is a good idea, and
Mhm.
enough so that I should at least try it out. And now after you like have done something for a bit, you're like, okay, what's working, what's not working. It's like you're not going to know when you first start doing something
Mhm.
all the roadblocks and hurdles that you run into. So there is like a bit of a leap of faith to it. But
Mm-hmm.
like, and once you get going though, that's how you kind of continue to like refine your ideas and improve. Where like I think I think YouTube channels and YouTubers are a really good example of that. Is you look back at their super old stuff, like let's take something like Mr. Beast, who's known for like making really like entertaining family friendly videos. His
Mm-hmm.
early stuff was just him talking to a camera, like getting comfortable. Even with us with this podcast, like you have to start somewhere, and once you kind of get that like baseline foundation figured out, you can start to be a bit more aware about like, okay, here's the things that are working, here are the things that aren't. Let's cut
Exactly.
off the fat of the stuff that's not working, focus on what is, and also go, what problems are we trying to solve that the stuff that didn't work, we still have to solve it. And like that's when you can like try new ideas. And like with the newsletter now, like I'm excited to see where it goes in the future, and maybe there will be a day it goes back to weekly, but like at least
Right.
for right now, like having that ability to adapt to it, it's what's decided between being able to continue this versus like having to shelf it, like not being so stuck to your idea. Where like I'll be very stubborn about ideas. If I want to try something, like it's hard to get me off it if I can't find a reason not to.
Mm-hmm.
But once I find like what's not working and I'm able to recognize it myself, that's I'm like, okay, in order to like save the whole boat, we got to like cut off some areas of like whatever is not fully like working to the point it needs to be.
Yeah, I think that's like also like a really important skill, right? Because you could
Mhm.
have definitely been like, you know what, this is not working for me. And I decided that it was going to be weekly. And since it's not going to be weekly anymore, this is over and that's it. And you just like
Yeah.
disappear from the earth or whatever, you know? So yeah, just I think there's times where you can actually go back and say, you know what, I'm not able to do this like this right now because the quality is not going to be what I want it to be. And please let's adjust because sometimes we're just so like, I'm not going to adjust, you know, I need to get this done right now. Or I don't know, like there's people that they might not even like just tell you, for example, like if you have a deadline and you're working with someone, they might not tell you, you know, hey, I wasn't able to do it, but I'll do it tomorrow. You know, they just disappear. So I felt like that was a great decision for you. I was telling you to basically take breaks because I know how much you work, you know, and I think it's gonna be awesome.
Yeah. It is kind of funny because I am like grateful I have these problems, because the
Yeah,
reverse of having this, because I'm, even though like there's some learning pains as part of this, and I think part of, I just think growing as a person is pushing yourself further than you can actually go, and like hitting
definitely.
that wall and stumbling. So then like you can like regroup and be like, okay, we learned some lessons, but I got to learn quicker than I would have otherwise because I was a bit bold. But I forgot what I started that point, but I had somewhere else going with that, but I lost it. But I'm trying to let me think if I can remember. Yeah, no, I don't know where I was going with that. Do you,
You know, like I also think like the fact that like you started all these new projects and like they're pushing you to learn, they're so important because like for example, I remember that like a month ago I met with this kid that I think I told you about that he was doing an internship for a PM role. He was about to start this internship in another company and he was telling me that he was very nervous about public speaking, right? And giving presentations and not using this like filler words. And I remember that at the beginning, oh my God, like I hate replaying our podcast, but I was like, oh my God, all of the filler words I'm using, like they're driving me crazy, right? And I know I still have them, but I'm more conscious about it. And that helps a lot. Like you putting yourself in this situation, like, yeah, we might look at our podcast like, you know, when we started, like in a couple of months or years, and we'll be like, wow, you know, like this has changed so much. Like we're way better as at public speaking. That is so important. It's such an important skill to have as a PM, you know, and putting our thoughts together, like something as simple as, you know, putting your thoughts together sometimes is hard, you know? So I think just trying new things, pushing yourself to do uncomfortable things is the best way of learning too.
Yeah, I would say public speaking probably for me is like one of my weakest skills naturally. So like just with the podcast, like the
And
filler
that's
words and
so
stuff,
weird because you're
yeah, we've
so good. You're so good at it.
I I like I don't know what it is. I like I'm hard on myself about it. Like even with just the fact I lost my train of thought right there, I hate it. I worry so much about going too long on my tangents and stuff. I think that's honestly that kind of self-critical attitude is what drives you to be
Mhm.
better and why we have gotten better like just in such a short amount of episodes like doing this because
Mhm.
like we are constantly like looking to improve it, but I don't know. It's
Yeah. I don't know. I think first of all, you are great at speaking and explaining things and putting things together. I think that's such a great skill that you have. So do not say that because you are really good. And I do think that overall we've improved a little more, you know? Like I
Mhm.
think one of our comments was to maybe make our, whenever we're talking about something a little more conversational. And I think that that's something that we're working on right now. And because that was part of why we started this podcast, right? Because we had good conversations that taught us things. Like every time we spoke, we would come up with like a different way of seeing things. So
Yeah. And I think
we
it's
sorry,
oh
go ahead.
no, and like I think like especially with like technical stuff, that's super important because
Mm-hmm.
it's why this podcast isn't just us talking technical the whole time is because like
Mm-hmm.
you can only take in so much information at once. So we have to like almost kind of put the pill, like wrap it in the peanut butter of just casual conversation, keep it fun, where it's like we can go
Mm-hmm.
in and out of like, hey, like we're talking about how the two of us are going to be doing some collaborative like SQL CL meets graph and spatial work. I was talking a bit about like the SQL CL liquid based stuff. And but like it's not just like us hounding the hardcore information the whole time. And I'm really excited to see where we go with this just because like even just talking about the technical stuff earlier, like I'm excited to see just us getting so much more fluent, getting in and out of like conversation mode to technical mode and making it seem like seamless, like in
Yep.
that process.
And like I feel like honestly, like the little tips that we give people of like, collaborate with other people or this skill is good for this or this other thing, like that is part of like your human part, that if let's say you're not that technical, but you bring those creative things to the table with your team, they might be very impressed. So that could make a difference too. Going back to our discussion, I think we have one more discussion, and I
Mhm.
actually we want to tie it down to how we say that, like everyone is so collaborative, and we've always had really good experiences when working, asking questions for other teams and stuff like that, right? But have you ever had like an experience where you're working with someone or in something and they're not doing their job?
It's funny because I have a lot of like school group project
Okay.
examples. And it's
Don't work.
something that not really with work. I've gotten lucky with that because I would say I'm like super on guard for that kind of behavior just because
Mhm.
like I don't want the quality of what I'm working on. That this is
Mhm.
something where I think it's kind of like my competitive versus cooperative brain where
Mhm.
I've had to learn as I grow up. And I think this is just an everyone like maturity thing, like
Right.
how to be more cooperative. Like one of the things for me is like I will be pretty like I prioritize like quality of work, I would say,
Mhm.
over like the social kumbaya.
Yep.
So I am kind of curious, like, especially as I get more into collaborative stuff where it's not just I have to do my part and say the other aspects are just completely outside my hands,
Mhm.
kind of like how I'll handle that because that is a hard one. And my thing back in the day with college or something is I would just do that person's work because it would take more time to
Follow up with them and
yeah,
all.
it take more time to be their parent, and then they still wouldn't do a good job than it would to like get them to do it. And I'm not talking like the people who care and are actually trying, but say maybe they're a little bit area they need like a little extra help. It's like the same way how I'm really appreciative when I can like go to someone and they'll like help me out, like kind of
Mhm.
here's the way to do things. I like to do the same thing with other people where it's like if you're making an honest effort, like this is what I'm talking about, like
Right.
always help people become better at what they do. I'm
Definitely.
talking about the people where it's like it's very apparent that they don't care and they're not going to
Mhm.
care kind of thing. But yeah,
Yep.
I'm trying to think if I have any examples of that just in solution engineering or PM. I don't think I've ran into that because solution engineering, it's like we had our cohorts in terms of um when Ramu and I were solution engineers, especially during training, they kind of put us up into these little squads of like two or three people. And I got lucky with that where my cohort were two other people on my team. Shout out to Chandana and Carrington. They were both like great, sweet people who worked hard. So I didn't have an issue there. And just even now being in PM and like working with Jeff and Chris and whenever I like reach out to like our developer or anyone else, it's like I haven't really everyone's been so kind of on their
Doing
game.
their stuff. Yeah.
So I haven't like ran into that problem yet here.
Yeah, because like I would love to know how adults
Yeah.
acting like I'm not an adult, but how adults handle this because I do think that I also have that approach of like, you know what, I'm just going to do it myself. But just to clarify, it has nothing to do with like my team right now. Honestly, like I love my team. They like we're all so collaborative that I cannot even complain. And that actually that project made me realize that I have an awesome team, because sometimes you're at work and you're like, this is not college anymore. This is real life. You're getting paid to do things and you don't want to annoy anyone around you. Like they could be the person that writes your recommendation letter in the future. So I was working on a project outside, right? And I was having a hard time with one person not doing
Mhm.
their job or their work, and me following up with that person apart from like the other team because I don't want that person to get into any trouble or any issues. But of course, I have my other job that I have to do where I have literally deadlines. I have to, deliver really well too. And I'm doing part of my job that it's already like taking a lot of my time to have someone not do their part, and maybe keeping me behind because they might have to do something before I do my part of the job, right? So I feel like my boyfriend, he's a tech lead, right? So he has a team under him.
Mhm.
And I was venting a little bit, and he was like, he basically said you have terrible like leadership skills because you should have said something, to someone, or you should have like call them out or whatever. And and that made me think like, okay, maybe I'm not doing the adult thing to do, right? Instead of like maybe I should have spoken to someone or something, right? But I just felt like I didn't want to like put that person in like a bad situation, even though
Yeah.
I did feel like sometimes they didn't care about what they were doing, and I ended up doing it. I ended up doing all the work that was blocking me from continuing. So I don't know. It was just such a hard situation for me because I'm not a confrontational person. And I did feel like I was kind of pulling this person to do their job.
Yeah. That's definitely something that I've been trying to kind of find my frequency with.
Mhm.
And I would say is like one of the major things I've been like focusing on lately is because I come from the Northeast and
Mhm.
just it's kind of funny because I would say like from a Northeasterner's perspective, I'm like very accommodating
Mhm.
and but like if you take me outside the Northeast environment, I would say that like my default is more assertive than most, I would say, like cross United States cultures.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's something about like the directness of it.
Mm-hmm.
And with the space that we work with, like with product management and tech, is there is a lot of ambiguity, expertise, and
Mm-hmm.
you don't always have the full picture.
Mm-hmm.
So I've personally been trying to kind of balance the whole like my brain thinks it knows what's going on, and I like to kind of like have that direct conversation with the fact that I've also been like, I'm chances are I'm not the smartest one in the room in any given
Right.
situation,
Mm-hmm.
and you probably don't want to be because then you're not learning from people.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like balancing that, like when do I need to just be like assertive, straight up, quote unquote, like call people out
Right.
versus one, it's like be kind of empathy. It's like that empathy versus tough love type thing where like who knows, like maybe someone's like having like a bad day or a week or something and they do a great job with the other stuff they work on, but for
Mm-hmm.
whatever reason they're sandbagging on your thing. On
Yeah.
one hand, you don't want to be like too aggressive with
Right.
calling them out because then it's like, well, now your name has like just a bad ring in their own mind. And chances
Mm-hmm.
are, kind of like we were talking about, how you have all these different expertise areas across a big tech company and you are reliant on each other. If you
Mm-hmm.
ever like need to reach out for that, like that person for something, it's like now you're kind of starting from an awkward place. But
Right.
then on the other hand, it's like, well, we all just can't be super empathetic and accommodating.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like, just having that direct confrontation, just even be like, hey, dude, like, what's up kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's that could, like, A, bring up, just help you bring stuff to light and
Mm-hmm.
reveal that there's more going on in the situation than you know. Or maybe even
Right.
just like finally ring some sense into the person because if you don't like call someone, it's like kind of like that balance where it's like you can't just go around calling everyone out because no one's gonna like you
Mm-hmm.
and you're gonna just not gonna be able to get stuff done. But
Mm-hmm.
you also just like, I don't know, if you never call anyone out, no one ever learns. And then you just kind of have like people like going around the ecosystem like causing problems, but no one is
Right.
afraid of like speaking up. So I don't know. It's like my kind of version of it hasn't really been so much I've had to like someone this has been directed towards,
Mm-hmm.
almost kind of it's been more for me just trying to balance how empathetic I should be versus how kind of like, okay, I have an idea, like let me be direct about it and like let's kind of move forward. It's kind of like that, I guess you would call it like military, like top down, like give your orders, go execute. There's an efficiency to it versus your like council meeting. We all kind of put our thoughts in the center and get swirled around and we come to a solution where it's like a little bit of this person, a little bit of that person. Where like I think that's kind of one of those things that might make it so hard to be a good leader, but like when you are, it's super impactful being able to switch between those two modes because I don't think it's like one or the other. Like I think it's kind of
Right.
you have to find out what the situation is for. But yeah, that's that whole just dealing with people who like aren't kind of like holding their weight.
Like
That's like a tricky one.
and I definitely agree with like being sympathetic, if that's the word, right?
Mhm. Sympathy
Um,
is when you sympathy is when you can't directly relate, but you still like want to give your feelings. Empathy is
oh,
the one
okay.
where you can personally relate. I'm always like trying to remind myself on those two.
Okay, because like I do feel like I can relate to people. It was like the way the communication went, I'm
Mhm.
almost positive that at some times it was more of like I'm not I just I'm just leaving this for the last minute or whatever, like this is not my priority type of thing. So, and honestly, like when I heard comments like that, I was like, wow, like I didn't know how to like, like react to that.
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, I was thinking to myself, we're adults. Like, I'm not going to go and tell on you, like I
Yeah.
feel like that was just like, I'm not gonna call your mom until, you know what I mean? Tell her that you're hitting me or something, like, you know what I mean, as a child or whatever, or tell the
Yeah.
teacher. So that was me thinking I was being mature, but at the same that's the well, sorry, that's the thing, right? Like,
You
we
don't want to overreact, but you also like don't want to underreact too.
right, because like when it's affecting me, those were like the weeks where I was working till late, because I was trying to manage my actual job with the project that I signed up for, with other things, so that did affect my work, and me as a person, because I'm not resting enough, because I'm dealing with this, plus you're giving me social, I don't know, like stress, because I don't know how to cope with this. So it's
Mhm.
like, I definitely wonder what's like the best way of dealing with someone that doesn't work or doesn't want to do their work at work, as an adult,
That would be a good question to like save in our notebook for when we have some guests on,
Yeah.
especially when we're talking to like the manager types, because like conflict mediation is, I would say, probably most of management, especially because there's like so much politics like
Yeah.
involved with just high level decision making, especially if there's like a lot of money on the mind, like on the line and stuff. So
Yeah.
I find those topics super fascinating because I don't know, it's like I feel like I will always have that business love in me. And I would say kind of like my career trajectory I'm hoping for is to get more into like upper level management roles and stuff at some point. So I've also just found it helpful to think about these kinds of things now because it helps me be more like sympathetic towards my manager and try to like be
Yeah.
proactive in terms of like I want my goal is to get my stuff done, but also hopefully like communicate with you and make your life as like easy as possible too. Like what like try to get in the mind of Jeff and be like, what is he probably worried about and thinking
Mhm.
about? And if I can start to at
How can I
least,
avoid that?
yeah, try to like approach things from that perspective, then you kind of know how to package things and also how to like predict problems and things that you can help with.
Exactly. Yeah. That is, I think that's definitely, if anyone has any suggestions, please leave us a comment.
Yeah, because I'm curious how people deal with that. And I'm also kind of curious how they learn to deal with that. Like, I would
Mhm.
guess those are one of those things where you can like only learn through experience.
Yeah,
Or
because like actually, like I've seen my boyfriend, right? Because we're like we live in a 1-1, so like sometimes I'll hear his conversations and stuff, and I've
Mhm.
heard him pull that person out of like their meeting or whatever, and kind of ask them like, is everything okay? Like, how can I help you? Kind of like get your job done faster. Like what's happening? Is there anything you can understand, right? And they might continue, right? So then second call again, like we're running into this issue again, you're causing a couple of blockers, like what can we do? Like, do you want me to like talk to someone else to see if they can help you with your job until catch the rhythm of things, blah blah. And then the third time he might have to escalate it,
Mhm.
because they're like intense, and like developing. So yeah, I don't know, but he does it like super calmly, Um, and some people have even gone back to him and they've told him like, "Hey, thank you so much for calling me out. Like, you know, now I'm like more mature in that sense or whatever, But I was just like, damn, I'm not even your manager. Like, I don't know what to do,
We should get your boyfriend on the podcast. When I was like hearing that story, I'm like, dang, that's like a good way of handling that. Like, start from the whole like, hey, like everything okay perspective, but then you
Right,
slowly like get up to like, okay, if you're not gonna like tell me what's up, you gotta get your shit together.
right. No, literally.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, like, that's the problem, right? Like your aim is to get your job done, right? If there's something going on, of course, like we understand, but at the same time, like if nothing is going on, then we have a problem.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a hard topic. At least for me, oh my God, I hated it so I was so stressed for days because I didn't know how to handle that. So yeah. it's good that you haven't run into that, honestly.
I know. I was like thinking about like actually my life's been kind of good so far, but yeah, it's funny because I feel like everyone has like your school group project examples of it, but I don't know. I think I've talked about it's like I've gotten lucky with the ecosystems in Oracle I've been in, and it does make you kind of appreciate like being around these people and like not wanting to lose that because
Yeah,
like once you find people who's like care and they like work hard and they're smart, it's like that's a really great thing to like have
definitely.
around.
It's just hard to like let go of that, you know?
Hmm.
But yeah, I think it's been some time. So do you think we could end the podcast on this
Yeah,
note?
this is probably a pretty good place to end it.
Yeah. Well, thank you everyone for listening. I hope you enjoy this episode and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Hope everyone has a good week. That was technically managing.